called to us this morning. I don't know what's going on.
Why would they dig up dead?
Entire bottle of vodka, Ashley. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Even though I do hate her, I still love her at the same time. That bothers me. It's so confusing.
Pay attention to the following moment.
You heard a shower running, and then you said an interesting thing. You said, I assumed it was Ashley. Would that be because you knew that David was passed out near death in his bed?
No.
You actually said in your testimony yesterday, you said, David was in bed. I assumed it was Ashley. How did you know David was in bed?
That's where he was when I left him last.
The prosecutor might seem overly suspicious. Why make such a big deal over who was showering and who was sleeping? But look again at the defendant. This is Stacey Castor. She killed both of her husbands and tried to frame her daughter for it. Her defiant attitude and blatant lies drove the prosecutor crazy.
My God, is this your testimony?
And believe me, you might find this case just as outrageous by the end of today's video. But I must warn you, if you're triggered by the themes of self-harm and suicide, this is your chance to turn back. If you're ready, let's dive in. Stacey Ruth Daniels was born on July 24th, 1967, in the little town of Clay, New York. By all accounts, Stacey was a jolly little girl. She liked to play with her parents, Jerry and Judy, and her older brother, Jamie, and her sister, Darcy. Jerry worked as a car salesman, but Judy was a stay-at-home mom. So it was a lively house that Stacey grew up in. There was always someone to talk to or play with, but she wouldn't be the playful type forever.
I know I was very stubborn and headstrong even as a kid, so my mom had her work cut out.
According to her parents, Stacey was a quick learner, and her family encouraged her to put her intelligence to good use. So she decided she would pursue a law degree. But you know how back in the day, if a woman got married really early, she would say goodbye to her career dreams? Well, that's exactly what happened with Stacey. In 1985, Stacey was a senior at the Weedsport High School when she fell in love for the first time. Michael Wallace was 6 years her senior, but they had a few friends in common, and Stacey felt really drawn to his joyful teddy bear nature. But his appearance could be deceiving. Michael was already a divorced man, and his ex-wife was Stacey's third cousin, Nancy. But their relationship had been a really complicated one. When the two got married as high school seniors, Nancy was pregnant with another man's child. Talk about starting early, right? A few years later, the two had a son together. But by then, their love had turned to dust, and they were just sticking together for their baby. Amidst all this, Mike started getting arrested every few months for DUI. When he wasn't DUI, Michael would be drunk at home, and oftentimes he would be abusive towards his wife. So in 1984, Nancy filed for divorce. A year later, Mike and Stacey became an item. The relationship went well for a few years, especially as the two were just dating, and there was a good amount of space between them. But in 1987, Stacey and her mom were involved in a car accident. They weren't badly injured, but they had to go to the hospital, and when they did, Stacey found out she was pregnant. This was a telling moment for her relationship with Mike. When he found out, he pulled out of the relationship. He said he didn't want to be a father all over again. But Stacey decided to have the child anyway. So in 1988, she gave birth to Ashley, her first daughter. And by the end of the year, Michael became a part of the family too. In fact, he wanted to show Stacey he was serious about it, so the two got married at Stacey's parents' house. And over the next few years, they became one big happy family, as Nancy and her two children would spend most of their time with Mike, Stacey, and Ashley. And in 1991, the two had another daughter, Bree. As the two girls grew up, two interesting friendships took shape. Mike loved Bree more than anything else, and the two became best buddies. Stacey didn't like this favoritism, so to get back at Mike, she became really close to Ashley. But notice how she did it out of spite more than out of love. This will become relevant later. It might seem like Stacey and Mike had it good, but the problems Mike had in his first marriage soon started to cause trouble in his second one too. In short, he was an alcohol and illegal substance addict. But for a long time, Stacey could simply ignore this because they didn't see each other much. Mike worked as a mechanic and Stacey worked as an ambulance dispatcher. They were on different shifts, and for days on end, they would just see each other in bed for a few hours. Soon enough, the distance grew between them, and Mike began to cheat on Stacey. In late 1999, Stacey told one of her friends she wanted to divorce Michael. There was nothing left for them to work on. Still, she wanted to wait out the winter holidays and the special Millennium New Year, if only for the kids. She said she'd contact her lawyer in January, but she never would. Just after New Year's, Mike became violently ill. He told his doctor he felt as if he was constantly drunk and dizzy. However, the doctor couldn't figure out what was happening. Soon enough, Mike couldn't get out of bed. He was either throwing up, really weak, or simply unable to walk. As a 38-year-old man with zero medical history, this seemed very strange to him and to those around him. On January 11th, 12-year-old Ashley came home from school. She found her dad on the couch having a fit. She didn't know what was happening, and as she would describe it, she thought he was making funny faces.
I came home and I called my mom to tell her that I was home. And he was laying on the couch and he was making funny faces. Well, what I thought were funny faces. I got off the phone with her and I turned the TV on, and all of a sudden he just sticks his arm up in the air and like puts his arm on his side, and then his arm just fell down.
Then he was gone. Ashley saw her father die, and she didn't know what to do to help. She left the house and went to pick up her little sister from school. Meanwhile, Stacey came home, found Mike, and called 911. Then she had her mom come over and take care of the girls. When the ambulances arrived, the doctors pronounced Mike dead at the scene. Without hesitation, Stacey informed her daughters of this. Stacey wasn't crying, and she wasn't in a state of shock. To Ashley and Bree, this might have looked like any adult being strong and mature. But there was a much darker reason behind Stacey's lack of emotion. Trust me. The doctors had to figure out Michael's cause of death, and while it didn't make a lot of sense for a 38-year-old man with no previous conditions, they concluded it was a heart attack. Nevertheless, they asked Stacey if she wanted them to conduct a formal autopsy to see if there was another reason behind this mysterious death. Stacey said no thank you. Mike's sister, on the other hand, insisted that the doctors did conduct an autopsy. But as his wife, Stacey had the final word, and she said no. A few months later, Stacey got $50,000 in life insurance. She and her daughters celebrated by going to Disneyland.
We all used to eat dinner together, and laugh and joke around. It just used to be me, her, and my sister. We were all of us girls, and we did a lot of things together.
The rest of the money went on Mike's funeral and various bills. Those who knew Stacey saw a grieving mom who was trying her best to help her daughters move past this tragedy. But she herself moved past it, and she did so very quickly. Within a year of Mike's death, Stacey started dating David Castor. David was born on June 12, 1957, in Syracuse, New York. His life seemed pretty set out from the start. He married his first wife Janice during high school, and he inherited his father's business, a conditioning, installation, and repair company. But in 1987, David had a serious accident while testing a dirt bike in a field. Janice and their son, David Jr., saw the bike explode and their dad fly across the field to what they thought was his death. But he was wearing a helmet which saved his life. Still, he suffered a severe cerebral constitution. When he first woke up in the hospital, David didn't remember a thing, and he was violent towards his doctors. As months passed, his memory came back, but his violent impulses got worse. According to Janice, he was always a bit controlling as a partner, but after the accident, he was impossible to be around. It was so bad that David Jr. left home at 16 and enrolled in the Army. And in January 2007, Janice left him too. Oddly enough, this is also when Stacey decided to leave Mike. And just like Mike, David had a drinking problem. After the divorce, he started drinking even more. Then, he came up with a really strange plan. He would hire a female office manager to his firm, start dating her, and then ask her to marry him. He tried 3 times, but third time lucky, and the woman was no other than Stacey Wallace. This is how, on August 16th, 2003, she became Stacey Castor. Stacey wasn't a huge fan of David, but she liked his business, his assets, and his home. And as a single mother of 2, she was barely handling all the expenses, and she was eager to have an easier life. But once she and her daughters moved into David's home, things took a turn for the worse. David was extremely controlling and had a strict set of rules that the three women had to follow. But none of them would simply comply. By now, Ashley and Bree were old enough to be smart and independent, and Stacey had taught them to be this way. Even as a kid, Stacey would question everything, and she wouldn't stand here because I told you so. She wanted to know why a rule was a rule, and she wouldn't just respect it without a good reason. So Stacey and David's marriage was a roller coaster, but it wouldn't be for long.
Police Communications, can I help you?
My name is Stacey Castor. My husband didn't show up to work this morning. I don't know what's going on. I'm just getting a little concerned because I haven't talked to him since 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday when he locked me out of the bedroom.
Has he ever mentioned hurting himself or harming himself? Or
Friday night when we were arguing, he told me to get out, take my kids and get out. I could leave. And then 5 minutes later, he said if I left, he would make me sorry. I would be sorry if I ever left him.
Soon after their second anniversary, Stacey made this strange 911 call. According to her, she and David had an awful argument about their anniversary vacation. David wanted to go on vacation with only Stacey, but Stacey wanted to take her daughters too. The fight lasted 7 hours straight. Then, after a couple of hours, it continued in the garage, where she'd gone to smoke a cigarette. She also saw David drinking from a Diet Pepsi can, and when she asked for a sip, he said no. Then he took a bottle of whiskey and locked himself in the bedroom. That was Friday night. Stacey called 911 on Monday morning. Before she hung up, she mentioned David was depressed as his father had recently died. Within an hour, officers arrived at their home, and so did Stacey. When they kicked down the door, they found David lying face down on his bed, completely naked. He was pronounced dead at the scene. What a strange coincidence, right? Except this time, the officers saw something truly strange on David's bedstand, a tiny clue that would unearth this whole case and reveal Stacey's horrifying personality. As the officers looked closely at David's bedstand, they noticed a glass with a weird green substance in it. Under the bed, a blue bottle was sticking out. The officers' fears were confirmed. This was antifreeze. Drinking antifreeze, as you might have guessed, is lethal. It forms crystals in your blood and tissues until every organ fails. But the idea that David took his own life in this way was really odd. The officers knew ingesting antifreeze leads to an excruciating death, with terrible pain, vomiting, and slow agony. Plus, there was also a gun under David's bed. Why hadn't he just used that instead? And then the detectives looked inside the kitchen bin. They also found a turkey baster, which smelled like alcohol. So they took this and the antifreeze to the glass lab to test the fingerprints on them. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Stacey's fingerprints were on the glass, but not like she held the glass to drink from it. The fingerprints were on the bottom of the glass, just like you'd hold it for someone else. Someone sick in bed, maybe. The turkey baster came back from the lab with two interesting results. On the one hand, there was antifreeze as well as alcohol in it. On the other hand, David's DNA was on its tip. Over the next 2 years, investigators would uncover a myriad of red flags. First, there was David's will, which he had written recently. In it, he left all of his assets to Stacey and her 2 daughters, but the police did a quick check and it revealed that he had a son, so this didn't make any sense.
I found out I was no longer my father's will. There was a new will and that Stacey got everything. That included everything that my parents earned through their whole life.
Then Stacey was already spending David's life insurance like it was her birthday. She was buying herself nice things, she was renovating her house, and she was making big plans for her and her daughters. Almost like the money hadn't come out of a tragedy. Then, of course, was Michael Wallace's death. As soon as the investigators checked Stacey's history, they uncovered the mysterious illness of her late husband. They also learned that no autopsy was conducted and that the death had been ruled a heart attack. So it wasn't long before the police realized what they had to do. They went to the cemetery where, in a really creepy twist, Michael was buried right next to David. Then they exhumed Michael's body.
She tells me, they exhumed your father's body. And I didn't believe it, so I went out and checked. I started crying. I got upset, like, he was resting peacefully and they just dug him up. Why would they dig up Daddy?
This was happening 7 years after his death. so you'll be excused for thinking there was nothing left of poor Michael to examine. But remember those antifreeze crystals? They leave quite a mark, even after severe decomposition. So in 2007, it was revealed that Michael Wallace had died from antifreeze poisoning. This was just what the police needed for an interview with Stacey. They knew she would hold on to her story, that David was depressed and took his own life, so the investigator leading the interview decided to try for another strategy. They remembered from the crime scene photos that there were 2 glasses on the bedstand, the antifreeze one and one where there were traces of cranberry juice. So they asked Stacey which glass she poured the cranberry juice into. She replied,
"Well, when I poured the antifreeze, and then she stopped and said, I mean the cranberry juice."
That's right, a little Freudian slip, and the detective knew Stacey was guilty. Stacey knew she had been caught too, and so she decided to take the high road. She started accusing the detective of trying to frame her, and then threatened them with calling a lawyer. Finally, she stormed out of the police station. So the officers wiretapped her home and surveyed her 24/7, waiting for another little mistake. But this wasn't the investigators' only method. On Ashley's first day of college, they visited her at school.
Hello?
Mommy, they came to my freaking school.
They came to your school? Are you okay?
I'm gonna be okay, but I'm really freaking out right now.
They informed her that Michael did not die of a heart attack. He had been poisoned with antifreeze just like David. They suspected Stacey, and they asked Ashley what she thought of the situation. Ashley's first reaction was disbelief. She simply couldn't wrap her head around her mom doing something so vile. She told the cops that there was no way that could be true. After all, her mom was her best friend. They told each other everything. She wouldn't keep this from her, would she? And as it turns out, she would. And this is where the story gets truly dark. When Stacey found out that the police had spoken to her daughter, she was infuriated, but she was also afraid. So she came up with a plan. She called Ashley and started complaining about her emotional distress over this investigation. Then she proposed the two have a few drinks together, like mom and adult daughter. After all, Ashley had just started college, so it was an extra reason to celebrate. Ashley said yes, and that evening she visited her mom. Stacey served her daughter drinks in plastic cups. She'd mixed them herself. After drinking a few cups, Ashley crawled into bed and passed out, like she'd been drinking so much more. She woke up with a huge hangover and shrugged it off and went to school. But Stacey wouldn't stop there. She invited her daughter to drink the next evening as well. Trusting her mother with her life, Ashley accepted the invitation.
I need an ambulance.
What's the problem?
My daughter has taken some pills. Sounds like there's something in her throat.
Conscious?
Yes, she's making noise.
Is she breathing normally?
No. An entire bottle of vodka, Ashley.
Is that her?
Oh, she's throwing up. She's throwing up. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Stacey wasn't even going to make the 911 call if it wasn't for Bree. When Bree came home the next morning, she found her sister unconscious and urged her mom to call an ambulance. Then Bree spoke to the ambulance dispatcher. She found a letter written, then printed by Ashley in her room.
What's the letter?
She left a letter.
Left a note.
In the note, Ashley confessed to a double homicide, her dad and her stepdad. Then she wrote that as soon as she saw the police dig up her dad's body, she knew she would go to jail. That's why she decided to take her own life. Except it wasn't written by Ashley. Stacey had tried to kill her own daughter and frame her for the other two murders. Remember how Stacey had befriended Ashley only to get back at Michael and his affection for Bree? This is how twisted Stacey was. For her, Ashley was just a scapegoat so that she could get away with murder and live the rest of her life in peace. Imagine learning that your mother, who claimed to be your bestie, just tried to kill and frame you. Sadly, this is exactly what happened to Ashley. That morning, she was rushed to the hospital, and the paramedics just about managed to save her life. When she regained consciousness, officers surrounded her. They wanted to know what her last memory was. She said she was just drinking with her mother out of the plastic cups she served. When they asked her about the note she wrote, she said she didn't write any note. 7 years after her first murder, the police got a warrant for Stacey Castor's arrest. Now, Ashley and Bree were finally coming to terms with the harrowing reality of their lives. They had lived under the same roof with a killer who was perfectly willing to take their lives too, if it guaranteed her freedom. What's worse is that Stacey never confessed to the murders.
Because you've been poisoning him from Friday night onward, hadn't you?
No, sir.
No. Did Ashley poison him?
I did not poison him.
When did Ashley poison him?
I can't answer that question. That's it.
My God, is this your testimony?
That's not what I said.
Throughout her police interrogation and lengthy trial, Stacey kept her story straight. Her oldest daughter, Ashley, poisoned both her fathers. Then she felt guilty and tried to take her own life. She and her defense attorney even hired a private investigator to dig into Ashley's life and find something incriminating. That's right, with her daughter barely recovering from what could have been a gruesome death, Stacey was still trying to frame her. The private investigator found a letter Ashley had written to her boyfriend back in high school. She wrote that she was going to take her own life. Of course, this was a bit of teenage drama, as Ashley confirmed, but Stacey's defense team used this as a sign that she was really the type to do it. Still, how would they prove that she had killed her dad when she was 12?
Did you, when you were 12 years old, poison your father with antifreeze and rat poison?
No, I did not.
And did you poison your stepfather with antifreeze in 2005?
No, I did not.
Apart from Ashley's heartbreaking testimony, the prosecution had a few other things to show the jury. Several drafts of Ashley's fake suicide note were found on Stacey's computer. They'd also been written during the time when Ashley was at college. There was yet another incongruence here.
This attempted murder note had to have been written after 8:40 a.m. when Ashley called her mother and said 2 cops just visited me at school, because it makes reference in the note to that visit by the 2 cops. And the computer forensic analyst that the people will present to you will tell you that that note was generated prior to 2:37 p.m. on Wednesday, September the 12th. Somebody wrote that note. Somebody wrote that note and had it printed at Wetzel Road. Somebody practiced that note the day before. And somebody between 8:40 a.m. and 2:37 p.m. printed out that note and put it in Ashley's bedroom at the appropriate time.
Ashley only found out about the antifreeze poisoning after the police officers visited her. It was clear it wasn't her drafting this note on her mother's computer. The prosecutor also asked a simple question. What's more likely to happen? A 12-year-old daughter murdering her father and 5 years later her stepfather, or a wife murdering 2 husbands for their life insurance? He also pointed out to the fact that Stacey panicked only after the police exhumed Michael's body. This means that she killed him too, and this was the trigger for her attempted murder of Ashley.
This is a tale of 2 women who are joined forever by biology and joined inexorably at this trial by murder. The answers to those questions, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, will be as obvious as they appear.
Imagine being Ashley and sitting at your mom's trial, listening to this.
And how many times in those letters did you tell Lynn that you still love your daughter, Ashley?
I don't know.
How about not one single time? Does that sound correct?
Could be.
Could be. Could be that you referred to her very negatively, didn't you?
I'm sure I did.
That's right, because she killed, after all, your 2 husbands, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
She did.
Still, when prosecutor William Fitzpatrick pressed Stacey for one good reason why her daughter would kill Michael and David, Stacey just said, I don't know. The more he showed the jury how silly that was, the more Stacey doubled down. So the prosecutor decided to talk about 12-year-old Ashley. What sort of mental illness did she have so that she would kill her own father in such a cold, premeditated way? And
it wasn't just, I came home, I lost my temper, I hit him with a frying pan, and oh my God, he's dead. This was a long time periodic poisoning of her own father, correct?
Yes, yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Stacey kept dodging the questions about her daughter's mental health. She kept saying that she never said anything about Ashley being mentally ill, but the prosecutor was saying she had to be mentally ill to commit such a horrific murder at age 12.
What signs did you see of that mental illness?
None.
How about from the time up until David Castor's death? What signs did you see?
Of Ashley?
Of Ashley's mental illness?
As I said, after Ashley's father died, she had withdrawn. She became distant. She spent a lot of time alone.
Yeah, because he died, not because she'd killed him.
Wow, that sounds really weird, doesn't it? A girl, a 12-year-old that lost her father, she got withdrawn?
The trial lasted 3 whole weeks. Stacey remained quiet and defiant, answering most of the prosecutor's questions with, "I don't know," or "I didn't say that." But he drove her into a corner, pointing out to her lies and inconsistencies. Finally, he painted a clearer picture.
A woman that would murder 2 husbands for the convenience of it and for the profit of it, and then try to murder her own flesh and blood and frame her in death for those 2 murders.
In February 2009, Stacey Castor was found guilty of second-degree murder of David and attempted murder of Ashley.
I hate my mother for ruining so many people's lives. I didn't even know why she did it. What gave her the right to play God with people? And I hate her for having me be the one that found my dad, just like her for having Bree found me. I never knew what hate was until now. Even though I do hate her, I still love her at the same time. That bothers me. It's so confusing.
Stacey was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of David Castor and another 25 years for the attempted murder of Ashley. She got another 4 years for forging David's will. In 2016, Stacey was found dead in her cell. The doctors ruled it a heart attack. Perhaps it was sweet justice, but it can hardly be called so. Stacey never admitted to being guilty, and she never took responsibility for taking 2 innocent lives and attempting to take a 3rd one. How can you ever get closure knowing your own mom tried to kill you?
You're gonna be able to move on, and how so?
We already have. Thanks to my boyfriend and their family, we've moved on. We started moving on the day we moved into their house.
You go, girls. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Till next time, and keep yourself safe.